Hello, everybody. Happy Labor Day. Wish it was under happier circumstances. As probably many of you know, our press secretary, Kevin Zeese, passed away Sunday morning. Suddenly, I mean, we're still kind of getting our bearings together. It's been such a shock. And for those of you that didn't know Kevin, I'd be surprised because he was such a giant in our movement. He got active in drug policy reform back in the 80s, the anti-globalization movement. He actually called for Occupy before Occupy. He called for Occupy on Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 2011. And that was indicative of how attuned to what was going on he was. And he was prolific. I mean, he produced a daily news and opinion summary called Popular Resistance. I know many of you see it. A weekly radio program called Clearing the Fog that's on a lot of Pacifica and other radio stations. And on top of that, he was always a constant stream of op-eds, journal articles. I was talking with Ralph Nader this morning. He was Ralph Nader's press secretary in 2004. And, Ralph was saying, our society doesn't produce many people like Kevin Zeese. And, so we have a huge vacuum. And one thing I've heard from a lot of people who came across Kevin is whether they were a movement personality or just a rank and file person showing up for the first time, Kevin always made time for people and helped them. I mean, he was very selfless. And Kevin was argumentative. I mean, you never had a doubt about where Kevin was coming from. And some people had a problem with that. I really liked that because we didn't agree on everything. We had some real knockdown, drag out arguments. But at the end of the day, we could agree to disagree and respect the fact that we're all, going for the same place, which is freedom and justice. And so, we're remembering Kevin today, and doesn't make Labor Day as happy as it ought to be. So I know Angela has a few words to say as well about Kevin and they introduce our topic.
Hey, yeah, just thinking about Kevin and how smart he was and how available he was. He was one of the first people to welcome me to this campaign, and he was always available, for discourse and things that I needed to write, and was available for helping and, brought valuable insights and opinions to anything that we were discussing. And in this, particularly in this culture that we have in this country of anti-intellectualism, the kind of intelligence, the kind of compassion that he brought to his dealings with folks and dealings with me are exceptionally something to be treasured. And so, we're shocked, we are hurt, we are sending our love to his partner, Dr. Margaret Flowers, and lifting her up in our hearts through this time. And yeah, like Howie said, this isn't, Labor Day this is not how we envision feeling today, so it's a little bit more somber than we're expecting when we planned this out with him. And moving into the topic, somebody wants to tell y'all hi. This is Perdita. This is Dita. So she's here. And we are thinking of the fact that the labor movement, that Howie comes out of, the labor movement that I come out of. I have a Union bug tattoo on my arm. Labor's not. The labor movement isn't dead. And I think a lot of what folks need to remember is we need to go back to labor history. I think at this juncture of so many things being reimagined and reconsidered, I think we're in a place where it is time to have labor go back to its socialist roots, its radical roots. And this time, Let's organize everyone. Let's leave no worker out. Let's not, you know, gatekeep as far as, you know, who can be part of the movement, who can't. Let's make it all inclusive. So those are my thoughts going into this, and I'm going to pitch it to the president.
Well, let me just say a few words about, you know, where we're really at in the labor movement. We're coming off 45 years of stagnant wages and inequality growing to the point where working class life expectancies are in decline. And the bottom 50% of the population, in terms of the income scale, their median income is $18,000 a year. That's the core of the working class, and it's in poverty or on the edge of poverty. And I think one of the reasons for that is we went from 30% of the people who are working in unions at the peak in the 1950s. And then since the 1970s, when this wage stagnation and inequality started growing, the unions started losing on the left that represents working people. So I think, you know, that kind of sets the table for the guest we're bringing on today. His name is Fernando Ramirez, who I met when I was campaigning in California and went to East Los Angeles, where Fernando's been an organizer for a long time. He got his start in the immigrant rights movement. And for the last 15 years, he's been a labor union organizer. In fact, right now he's field organizer for the United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers. Most people know that as UE, one of the best unions in the country because it's really democratic. You go to their conventions and they'll hash things out. They really let the members have their say, which is a problem we don't have. I can tell you stories. Every time I tried to raise something in my local, I get ruled out of order in the Teamsters. So it's a great union. It's relatively small, but it punches way above its weight. And Fernando's also active in the LA Tenants Union and Socialist Alternative. And, you know, he gave me one of my best days in the campaign because he took me on a tour of East LA and the consequences of these military industrial factories now that are mostly closed. Terrible environmental consequences. There's signs all over the place saying, don't go in here. It's dangerous. And those sites are just sitting there. But of course, that leaches out into the community. And as the jobs left and gentrification moves toward East LA, they have a housing crisis. And of course, the economic conditions of the people are very difficult. And Fernando's right in the middle of that. And so I thought he would be a great person to have in this discussion for all of us. So Fernando, why don't you share your thoughts this Labor Day?
Thank you. Thanks, Howie. Thanks, Angela. Pleasure to be here with everybody. Happy Labor Day. Rest in power to Kevin. I mean, just like pretty much like you said, Howie. Right now, the labor movement. We're trying to improve. Gain that power. Go back to our roots. From the 1930s and 1940s, when we were a strong force, in this country. We had a strong labor movement. We fought, we got a lot of labor reforms, a lot of labor rights back then. And I think, throughout the years, we've been on the offensive. We've been trying to protect whatever little we have left. Because, they've been chipping away in the last 40, 50 years. The ruling class, both parties, both political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, even though the Democrats, always get that support from labor, sometimes they don't get it. They don't give it back. They pretty much, there's been a lot of opportunities to improve labor, to make it stronger, especially in the last 20 years. And they've dropped the ball. They've listened more to corporations, to their donors. Both parties are equally responsible for why the labor movement is at the state that we're in right now. The labor movement, it's been like pretty much going up and down. We've been losing a lot of battles in trying to maintain the density we once had, primarily because it's they've attacked a lot of the labor laws to make it a lot of difficult for workers to organize. And they've attacked a lot of labor reforms that we've had in the past before. And one of the things that I'm seeing now, with this COVID-19, is actually has exposed the system a lot, where we now have a genuine opportunity actually to organize, because now people are seeing what really the workers really are the ones that really run this society. Essential workers. Before, like, we hardly use that word, but now it's a household word now. It's a mainstream word now. Essential workers, meaning like pretty much all the workers, all the working class. And it's proven that this society cannot be, we cannot run it without essential workers. Billionaires are not essential. It clearly shows here. And so we need to, I think, reorganize. We need to, kind of use the struggles that we had in the past, our rich labor history that we had in the past, and then transform it to a new labor movement, the post COVID-19 labor movement, which is should focus more on essential workers, the need of all workers, right? But primarily the frontline workers that are taking on this crisis right now. Also, focus a lot more on, pretty much the Green New Deal also, because that's going to be a major turning point also. Right now we're dealing with the crisis, but we have a bigger crisis that's looming, and which is climate change. And one of the great things I always tell workers, especially in our union, and workers that I come across, is that the Green New Deal was written by a union worker, like yourself, how the original Green Deal came out of an actual union member. So those are the things we need to focus on, getting more workers to understand, building that class politics, so they could fight for their own interests that are independent from the Democratic Party. And help build like a united left front that's gonna help third parties, and eventually, hopefully, if we unite pretty much all the forces in the left, including the Green Party, all the other forces, eventually, hopefully, a workers' party could come out of that struggle. And like when you came to East LA, I wanted to give you a tour so you could see how the working class in different areas in LA, has been exposed to environmental racism, has been, pretty much struggling with housing. And that's something that as the labor movement, I think we have to start linking up those struggles. Like, we have to start connecting those struggles outside of the workplace that are going to be connected into the workplace. You know what I mean? Because like right now, for example, healthcare, with this whole COVID thing, one of the things that as the unions, we need to definitely push hard on Medicare for all. Support your campaign, because you're one of the few candidates, you and Angela, that are actually pushing for Medicare for all. We don't have no other candidates out there, aside from some other candidates too that are running. But the mainstream candidates are not supporting Medicare for all. But right now with COVID-19, one of the ways that is spreading in our community, especially like in East LA, for example, is because a lot of our folks are essential workers, and a lot of that, a lot of the COVID infections, that you're seeing, are coming from the workplace. So they go to work, they get exposed, because right now also we need to pretty much force these employers, these corporations, to pretty much protect essential workers. Right now, hasn't OSHA, under the Trump administration, has abandoned its relationship with the unions. Normally, OSHA has always worked with the unions to try to make the place, safer for the workers. Has always worked with immigrant rights, organizations, in dealing with workers, immigrant workers' conditions. And now, given that Trump has come in that's so anti-worker and anti-union, now all these agencies that's supposed to actually help maintain these workers safe are like literally abandoning all those their their work that they're supposed to be doing. So like that's one way that we could connect all these issues, because essential workers, when they're getting them, they're being exposed at work. They come home, they expose our family, the family. And right now, with the housing crisis being so bad in LA, you have multiple households that have multiple families in them, because it's hard for families to go out and get an apartment on their own. So they have to live in households where you have multiple families living. So when somebody that's essential comes back that's infected, it literally exposes the entire family. We're not like you know like other industries, a lot of industries where they could work from home, and where people could self quarantine themselves. Right here it's kind of hard to even do that, in some cases, what I mean. So everything is really connected, and it goes back to the workplace. When this crisis hit, millions, we had tens of millions of people unemployed, and those tens of millions of people lost their health care, because the vast majority of us, we get our health care through our employer. And so if we're out of work, we don't have health care. So that's why Medicare for all is so important right now. And so these are some of the things that I feel like we should definitely start focusing on a lot. Right now, I think a lot of unions are going to take the opportunity to organize, to include hazard pay now in their contracts, because like right now we've been fighting for hazard pay for a lot of essential workers, especially in our shops in California, in our union shops. They were declared essential. Pretty much everybody was declared essential. So our focus shifted in trying to basically fight to get PPE equipment, for the members. The our rank and file leaders, has done an amazing job making sure that we get all the PPE equipment that they need. The workers, they're fighting for hazard pay, which is not an easy fight. So now, the focus has been shifted a lot to, like, let's get, once contract negotiations come around again, we're definitely going to push to try to get all these benefits into the contract, because this is stuff that we never experienced before. Nobody anticipated this crisis to come. So now we're definitely going to fight. I mean, we've been fighting for hazard pay, but every union in America is going to fight to try to get it in their contract now, so it could be more guaranteed, and we don't have to depend on the state, to pass some sort of bill. I mean, all this stuff could be taken care of inside the shop if the workers just organize, put pressure on their boss, unite, and fight for all these things. Because we're not gonna get it through the state. We're not gonna get hazard pay through the state. We're gonna have to be in the shop, putting pressure on our bosses to make sure that they're gonna be paying hazard pay. Because I mean, it's not fair that the bosses are gonna make so much money off this pandemic, and yet we're not going to see anything from that. None of the workers are going to see anything from that. I mean, there's been pretty much reports that have come out where billionaires during the pandemic had doubled their fortunes, their wealth, and yet workers can't even get hazard pay. I mean? So those are some of the focuses that we want to focus on, that we've been focusing on in our shops, and I know other unions have. And then also we want to start definitely organizing political independence, being more politically independent. As a labor union, we need to be politically independent especially from the Democrats, organize independently. We have a long history of winning reforms that took a long struggle, and necessarily we didn't have to depend on like none of the politicians to get us some of these reforms. So, and I think, we need to connect with other struggles that are happening right now, like, not just healthcare, but Black Lives Matter. Pretty much, we challenge a lot of our members to think about their brothers and sisters, their Black brothers and sisters that are union. I mean? Like, we don't want nobody going through this, but also, like, one way is to connect, the workers in the workplace. They have so much in common, and one of the things is that we need to unite them that, you know, are along common struggles. You know what I mean? You know, just because you're a white worker doesn't mean, you know, you should support the fight against, you know, racism and discrimination against your fellow Black and brown workers, co-workers. You know what I mean? I don't want, you know, no Black and brown worker to be harassed, you know, pulled over while they're going to work, you know, or anything like that. You know what I mean? That's the type of mentality we need to create within our shops. You know, also housing. You know, you touched on housing. Gentrification is really big in our communities. We're trying to stop that, and it affects workers, you know, but also union workers. You know, we fought so hard to win raises in a negotiating table against our bosses, and yet those raises are not keeping up with the cost of living as far as like housing goes. I mean, we win a 4%, 3%, increase in our wages, but yet we go back, to our communities, we're facing an 8-10% increase in our rent. And that's, and before it was even more horrible, due to the movement here, the housing justice movement in California that are led by the LA Tenants Union. And we use, within the LA Tenants Union, we use a lot of examples that labor has done. Like, organizing in the workplace, we try to use those same examples to organize in the buildings, have the tenants form tenant union associations and then take on the landlord, just the same way that, a union shop would take on their boss, and we need to also connect, with the environmental racism. Like you mentioned, how we there's, pretty much a lot of working class communities. And those are all some of those are union households as well, and a lot of them are union households. And pretty much, in Southeast LA, where you were at, and then also East LA, the East Side, has experienced so much environmental racism and destruction. I mean, it's one of the most environmentally impacted areas in LA. Southeast LA, for example, you have the major 710 freeway that goes along the route. That freeway connects it to the ports, which is the biggest West Coast ports, Long Beach and LA, that, all the cargo comes in through there. And that freeway, pretty much you have in any given day, hundreds of thousands of trucks, going through that freeway. And all the kids that grow up along the side, the 710 freeway, they all have asthma. Most of them have asthma, due to the heavy pollution that's there. All the major freight railroads that go from the ports, into the communities, they all go through Southeast LA. Literally, the BNSF, the UP, the Union Pacific, Amtrak, they're all go through that area of Southeast LA. Due to some of those factories like Excite that I was giving you a tour about, basically have contaminated with lead multiple tens of thousands of households, because that was a battery recycling plant. And so it was releasing these toxic fumes every day for the last 30, 40 years. And it was literally, creating lead, pretty much lead, lead contamination. So there's probably I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's hundreds of thousands of households that their front yard or their backyard is contaminated with lead, which has led to a lot of health problems in those areas, And I mean, those are just some of the points. I mean, if I don't know if you want to, touch up on some of the stuff that I covered right now, or
Well, that covered a lot of ground, gives us a lot to think about.
yeah.
I noticed in the chat somebody said it's off topic. What do we say about funding the arts? Well, one thing we're for is a job guarantee, like making the WPA, the Works Progress Administration they had during the New Deal, expanded so everybody willing and able to work can get a public job if they can't get a living wage private job. And one thing they did back then was put artists to work, muralists, people put on plays, for public benefit. And all the different forms of art were supported. and we could use more art in our life. So that connects to labor. That's, that's cultural work, and we should put our cultural workers to work instead of having them, wait tables and starve and not be able to provide the gifts they can give us. So that answers that question. And as far as somebody said, well, you need a united front of the workers, that made me think we need to hone that. We need a united front of the workers against the greater and the lesser evil. Because every time, we give the Democrats as the lesser evil our votes, they take us for granted. Like Obama promised card check twice. That's where if the majority of members in a shop or office sign a card, they want a collective bargaining union and union recognition, they get it. And after 2008, they fussed around with it in the Senate and diluted it to the point where it wasn't worth passing anyway, and it never got out of committee. And then in 2012, Obama said, we're really going to do it this time. I mean, even Jimmy Hoffa, Jr., the president of my union, the Teamsters, was really angry when after that election, Obama said, no, we're not going to do it. And basically just told the labor movement, I'm not running for re-election. I don't need you anymore. And that we got to recognize is how we're being treated politically. So those are a couple comments that come to my mind based on what you said. Maybe Angela wants to add something.
Oh, I am so that question that I saw it in the chat too about the arts and everything that you just said. The arts are essential to life. The arts are essential to making people well-rounded as far as being ready to be world citizens, broadening your thinking skills. I mean, they are and one of the amazing things during the Wisconsin uprising in 2011 that you saw was so much art being done, so much art being made. There was music, in the rotunda every day when the firefighters union came through, and there were drum circles and the arts have been an integral, and if you've ever been in Milwaukee and participated in like Labor Fest or like our protests or anything like that, there's always giant puppets. There was Scabby the Rat. So I mean, this was, the arts are absolutely essential to culture, absolutely essential to our discussion of what labor, the function of the labor union. I would argue the arts can't be divorced from that, nor should it be. And creating a system where our artists are supported and are creating public art and are able, like Howie said, to create without having to serve capitalism because they're being supported. Those things should be a part of the infrastructure that we want going forward, and for us, it is.
Yeah, and then right now, I mean, that's one of the industries that's suffering right now, the arts and entertainment industry, due to the COVID. I've come across a lot of workers. I mean, I'm in LA, so I mean, Hollywood is right here, and it's totally unemployed. Almost entirely all Hollywood is unemployed right now. I've come across a lot of workers that work on the production stages and everything. There's the union AFTRA. Their whole lot of their membership is like literally off work right now. So we need to kind of find ways to, I mean, if we had a real pro-labor government, a real pro-labor party in power, a lot of these things would have been already addressed. How do we maintain the entire workers working? How do we use their skills to maintain them working? And how do we create better opportunities? So, I mean, one of the things too I wanted to connect to is that we want to expand, beyond the workplace as a labor movement. One of the things, like I mentioned, that we should build, solidarity against the anti-police brutality movement and everything. One of the things that comes to mind how we're all connected, and it goes back to us being workers. We had a recent shooting right here of Andres Guardado. I don't know if you guys heard of his young Latino kid. He got shot by the LA County sheriffs multiple times in the back. And he was at work. He was actually working as a security guard. But his dad is actually a member of Unite Here. He's the rank and file member of Unite Here. And I went to a rally in Compton because it happened in Compton. It was the LA County sheriffs from the Compton station. And when we had the rally, his dad spoke, and his dad said that I'm a member of Unite Here, and I was like, oh wow, it's like, it's literally hits home, being a labor organizer, and like, you always think about some of these things because we have African American members in our union, we have Latino members, and we want to fight for everybody to not have to go through none of this stuff, and so I think it's important that we connect those issues, beyond the workplace, but link them up though, not just like, link up the immigrant rights struggle with the labor movement, and then the right now I think we're doing a good job at healthcare, but I think part of the problem is that we have some of these like big top-down unions that they mainly think about what's instead of thinking what would be better for their members, they think about what's better for the Democratic Party. And so like you have these big unions, for example, I think, I don't know, I don't want to mention some, but I mean, a lot of people will know if you read some of the articles that are coming out, they went against Medicare for All, for example. I mean, that's really, being a union going against Medicare for All. I mean, like that's really something that we have a long way to go if once you hear a union going against Medicare for All. I mean, and that's the influence of the Democratic Party, because now you have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that are against Medicare for All. So now these unions are kind of using that same platform that they have to try to convince their members on why is it important to support Joe Biden.
Yeah, too often the union tops, the top leaders decide the limit of what they can demand is what the top Democrats say they're willing to do.
Yeah.
And the role of a movement is to demand a real solution and, make the politicians come to them. And instead, the movements, it's like going in to negotiate a contract and deciding you'll start where you think you're going to end with compromises.
Yep.
And, that's just throwing your power away. And, that's something that we got to organize at the rank and file to, force our unions, get new leadership, force them to educate and organize their own members. I mean, that's where the real power is. And instead they, honestly, I think some of the leadership is afraid if we get educated and organized as the rank and file, we're going to vote in new leadership and they'll be out of the top. So that's a dilemma we got to address within the labor movement.
Yeah. And right now, I think, like what's holding up the labor movement a lot is the public sector unions, but they've been being attacked because that's the bigger group that's left, because I mean they've done so much against the private sector that we're weak right now. I mean, I think this is the perfect opportunity to build the private sector, especially with this crisis. But I mean, the Democratic Party, like you said, they had every opportunity to pass the Employee Free Choice Act, which, they watered it down when they came into power in 2008, 2006, 2008. They watered it down, and, they didn't pass it. That would have would have been able to expand the numbers of the private sector. But now they didn't even pass that. And now these neoliberal policies that are promoted by the Democratic Party actually, their main focus is to attack the public sector unions, because neoliberal policies actually, their main focus is to privatize. So if you're privatizing, you're attacking the teachers union, you're attacking people that work for the water district, for the cities of our local governments, our state governments, so it's like we're facing, pretty much, there's a saying in the labor movement that UE always promoted, and why it's important that we independently organize from like the mainstream parties like the Democrat and the Republican, and and push more for workers' interests, because there's a saying that the bosses have two parties of their own, that the workers should have one, of their own, and we have under UE, we have a rich history of rank and file unionism. That's pretty much our style of unionism, and we have to go back to that, to the rank and file. I mean, that's really was the style of unionism that got us all the reforms that we have now. That's how the unions were created in the 30s and 40s, because before 1935 it was illegal for workers to form unions in the United States. I mean, they would literally kill you, to if you were organizing in the workplace, and so that rank and file bottom up unionism got us like literally pretty much helped build the labor movement to the point that you mentioned earlier, that well over 30% of all private sector workers in the United States were unionized at one point. But we have to go back to the traditions of rank and file unionism, bottom up unionism, making it more democratic, making the unions more democratic, and of course building the labor movement, going out and organizing non-union workers. But we have some core principles in rank and file unionism that we incorporate in our work. Number one is aggressive struggle. Aggressive struggle, pretty much there's a saying that we win what we fight for. If we're not gonna fight, we're really lost. But if we fight, we have at least a chance to win. And only through aggressive struggle, not by being nice or diplomatic or whatever, only through aggressive struggle in the workplace you're gonna win. Whether it be organizing, mobilizing your coworkers, organizing actions in the workplace, and all this is legal. Workers need to know the rights. Like even if you don't have a union, you could still do what we call concerted activity actions, where all you have to do is just unite with your coworkers and demand changes inside. I mean, if you're doing that already, you're basically almost one step, into becoming a union already. Because that's what a union requires for the workers to unite. Rank and file control, meaning that the members have to run the union. It has to be bottom up. All the decisions have to be made by the workers. And UE, like as a staff, we cannot make decisions for the workers. And all the leadership comes from the shop. And that leadership that the workers elect from their own coworkers, is hold accountable to the rest of the shop. We don't have like union bureaucrats making decisions for workers at the shop. It's pretty much the workers themselves. Political independence is another one of our core principles. Meaning, what I mentioned earlier, that we need a party of our own. I think the Green Party, could lead that, that struggle. The bosses, they have they have two parties that they could play with, and that they control pretty much. I mean, if it's not one party that's deliberately attacking us, there's the other one that pretends to support us but then attack us. And both parties are used by both the bosses to push their interests. International solidarity. We have a saying that there's no borders for the boss, there's no borders for capital. They could go anywhere, set up a big corporation anywhere, big business anywhere, exploit that nation's labor, natural resources. So but there is borders for both workers, right? But there is no borders for the boss. They could go anywhere they want, and so that's why we need to build international solidarity. We need to unite workers, at an international level, because I mean, we have the same common enemy. We have, in UE, we've always supported international solidarity work, where we work with independent rank and file unions from other countries, like in Mexico, Canada, Japan, Italy, France, all over the world, and we focus a lot on the more rank and file, bottom up, democratic unions that are also for social justice unionism, and because we had examples where we have shops here, like for example in the U.S. that they're in a big contract fight, and then in Mexico it's like literally the same employer, and there's shops over there and they're unionized too. So we reach out to them and we kind of work together to put pressure at an international level, and an international scale to the boss. And then we have to unite all workers, regardless of craft, age, sex, nationality, race, and political beliefs. Unite all workers and build more class politics. Because once workers start thinking more politically on their own class, that's what unites workers. Pretty much class politics unites workers, because then the workers will be fighting for their own interests. And that's really what's going to unite workers, So those are some of the core principles that we incorporate in our work, as a rank and file union,
Going back to we got a question here. I'll save that. Ricky Justiniano asks, is it worth talking about May Day today, since we were talking about unions on Labor Day? And, of course, May Day was the original Labor Day.
Yeah.
It was invented in this country in the fight for the 8-hour day. And they had the Haymarket Massacre, and some workers were hung for that, and became International Workers' Day. And Labor Day was later set up by Grover Cleveland as president as sort of the tame alternative to May Day. But the way I look at it is, now we got 2 days to think about this. We got May Day and Labor Day. The thing I was thinking of is, we were talking about, or Fernando was talking about, privatization and neoliberalism. And Angela, as a public sector worker, as a transit worker in Milwaukee, who Scott Walker was going after the collective bargaining rights of public employees, but he exempted transit workers, police, and firefighters. But Angela went up to Madison anyway, got her union involved. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because that, I think, is a great example of solidarity and the rank and file stepping up, and also a negative example, because in the end, the established unions pitched it to a recall vote against Walker and took the people off the street, and we lost our power. So, Angela, why don't you lived through that? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
And it is interesting that you brought that up, Howie, because when Fernando was talking about not siloing, I was like, yes, because one of the things that, when the Wisconsin uprising happened, fire, transit, because of the money that we received from the federal government to the transportation budget, and police, for whatever reason, but we were exempt. And so we made it our point to use the fact that we were exempt, to use our platform to stand with all the other workers who were being attacked, like the teachers, like the nurses, like postal workers, and show up for them, in support of them, wherever we were needed. And also, like what you were saying, Fernando, we also, as a union, were able to be part of Occupy, and be part of Occupy the Hood, which was the Black, Brown, and Indigenous, section of the movement, and Decolonize, and offer our union space to, when there was a bill that came up that would have made things that were misdemeanors into felonies. And y'all know how that feeds mass incarceration. And in a place like Milwaukee, we're already very hard hit by that. And of course, the folks who authored the bill thought they were going to slide it by under everybody's nose. We had, we were putting the information on buses, putting the leaflets in the seats. I know I did, getting the word out, like, yo, did you know that this, and this was a misdemeanor, and now this, and this, they're a felony. This is what they're trying to do. If you don't want this, this is what you need to do. Putting it on the bus seats, and you could see people read it. It was dope. And so, having people flyer our buses, and ultimately they would not give us a hearing on that in Madison, the capital of Wisconsin. So we held a people's hearing in our union hall, and folks went and took that up there to them. We beat the bill. So, it's absolutely essential for labor to understand that you do not exist in an ivory tower. If you are not connecting labor, the labor movement, and the workers involved in labor with those people in the street, with those movements that are happening, like Black Lives Matter, like, working with the indigenous folks and the movements around the country for indigenous solidarity and land back. If you are not fighting with our Latinx brothers and sisters and our fam, our SIBs, everywhere that they are, if you are disconnecting yourself from that, then you are irrelevant. And so, it was just really dope for both of y'all to bring that stuff up, because I'm sitting here thinking like because as a union, we made those connections that when they did come for us to privatize us, once that happened, under the direction of our former county executive up there, they led the charge twice to privatize our transit union, who showed up for us when we went out on strike, or when, I wasn't working with them, but I should, I'm always in. But when they hit the streets, the teachers, the postal workers, the nurses. So making those and community activists that we had always been there for and made sure we were working with. And so it's absolutely crucial for labor to understand that it is intimately connected with the movements for, movements for social justice around the country, movements for environmental justice around the country, and lifting up those ways that all of those issues have a home in the labor movement. We're connected to all of it.
Yeah, and then I mean, one of the things, I mean, thanks for sharing that, Angela. That was awesome. Thank you. I mean, one of the reasons why I think you guys are perfect, I mean, you have strong labor background. I mean, that's really key. You're union members yourselves, rank and file leaders. So, I mean, that's key. I mean, and one of the things right now, I mean, I think labor also has to lead is the green new deal movement. And Howie has like a lot of experience behind that, writing the green new deal. But it's because a lot of these jobs that are actually you know the jobs that we want to change are actual union jobs themselves too. People that work in the oil refineries, people that they're all union jobs. So I think labor has to play a big role in securing a real Green New Deal, not the watered down version, and unite all these workers around this the Green New Deal, because labor, definitely workers have to have a say in how the Green New Deal should apply. And because we want to make those jobs that are not good jobs, that are like contaminating the environment, to become Green New Deal union jobs. And but there's gonna be that those divisions within the labor movement that the bosses and the ruling class are gonna like feed on. I mean, you're already seeing it with the buildings and trades unions that traditionally have always been more to the right on the labor movement, on like issues of like social justice, we want good jobs, what we call justice jobs with justice. Those are the jobs we want, jobs with justice under the Green New Deal. We don't want jobs that, like, for example, are going to build more oil pipelines. There is a big division in the labor movement when the whole Standing Rock struggle was happening. I mean, you had some of the AFL-CIO leaders and even some of the buildings and trades and unions, coming out in support of the building the pipeline, just simply because those are jobs, but those are not the jobs that we want. We want jobs with justice. And our union and some of the other more progressive unions supported the struggle of the indigenous resistance there. And there was this whole debate that happened in the labor movement around that issue too. But that's why it's so important that I think the left wing of the labor movement really has to have strong influence over all these issues, and not necessarily listen to the Democratic Party leadership. I mean, there was that the group of unions that were Labor for Bernie, at one point, and a lot of those unions, especially going back to 2016, did not endorse Hillary. After that happened, and I think those unions, have the potential of breaking away, and forming a united left front that's going to incorporate the Green Party, incorporate all these other groups like Socialist Alternative, DSA, and then be led by these unions like UE, IOWU, the nurses union, the teachers union, and UTLA. I mean, they're really progressive. I mean, they take a really good progressive stance. Some of the Teamsters within the Teamsters within the rank and file is trying to change the Teamsters and make it more rank and file. It's called Teamsters for a Democratic Union. You probably heard of them, right, Howie? Yeah,
I've been a member my whole life as a Teamster.
Oh yeah,
Even as a
yeah,
retired Teamster, I'm still a member.
yeah, yeah. So we need to support like the members that are trying to change their own unions to make it more rank and file. More social justice unionism.
You mentioned the pipeline. I spent last Labor Day in Mackinac City at the invitation of actually the chair of the Democratic Party caucus of the Anishinaabe Indians in Michigan. And I met her at the Detroit rally to make Detroit the engine of the Green New Deal outside the Democratic primary debate on climate change. And, a Green introduced us, and she said, I need you because I need you to get the attention of these damn Democrats who won't come out against Enbridge Line 5, which is a big gas or oil pipeline that brings oil from the Bakken field in North Dakota and from the tar sands in Alberta through northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and northern Michigan to, I guess it's Lake Ontario or Lake Huron, and then it's shipped off to refineries. And so when I spoke at their rally under that big bridge across the Mackinac Straits, where they not only want to, they want to expand that pipeline. And this group of American Indians was saying, we don't want not expansion, we want to shut it down because the climate can't deal with it, our land can't deal with it. And they've had some terrible spills from that pipeline. So I told them I went there on Labor Day because unlike the labor movement, which doesn't understand these pipelines really don't provide them any jobs, the real jobs are in solar and wind and retrofitting buildings and building a smart grid. I mean, the numbers, there's a chart you can get from the Political Economy Research Institute out of Amherst that goes through all the different energy forms. And it's orders of magnitude more jobs from the clean energy than to keep the fossil fuel industry going. And so that's what I did last Labor Day because those Indians had a better idea how to create jobs than the leaders of a lot of these unions. And that's what goes on.
Yeah, and I mean, as a union, we're part of the pretty much a lot the movement to support the Green New Deal, and I think it's called Labor for Sustainability. We had this conference. I think, it was last year where it brought together all these labor unions, and basically there was discussion. There was, how should like a real Green New Deal look in the perspective of labor, and one of the things we saw too is that if we're gonna create these Green New Deal jobs that we want that are gonna be unionized. We want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity. For example, one of the things that was discussed, like we don't want no employment discrimination to happen, or no training discrimination. Like these jobs should be offered to everybody in the working class, despite of whatever issues that people might have had or whatever people should be offered all these jobs. That's one of the things that we noticed, that sometimes when the government passes these type of programs, they make it like free. Sometimes they exclude groups. And so we want to make sure that everybody's included in those jobs that you were talking about. Like solar, wind. Like pretty much. I mean, there's an entire industry that should be built around that.
Yeah, another organization besides what you mentioned, the Labor Network for Sustainability, and you people can
Yeah.
Google that, is Trade Unions for Energy Democracy. And
Yeah.
these are an international network of unions who are for an eco-socialist Green New Deal. Because when they're talking about energy democracy, they're saying we can't leave the utilities and the energy companies to the private sector, because they've totally created a mess. And they have no intention of cleaning up that mess with respect to the climate or the other consequences, like, the air pollution along Interstate 10 that you were talking about in LA. So they have great materials. It's called Trade Unions for Energy Democracy, and I recommend people take a look at that.
Yeah, no, we definitely had to nationalize all the power, power industry, power, water, everything. I mean, look at what's happening in California. I mean, like some of the deadliest fires we had last year, it was because of that corporation, PGE or something. I forgot the exact name. Yeah, in which they've been charging us a lot more for energy. On top of that, their whole infrastructure sucks. They haven't even invested in their own infrastructure. That's has led to some of these fires, have led to rolling blackouts like never before seen in California. Yeah, I totally agree with you on we should nationalize. I mean, part of the Green New Deal should be, like your Green New Deal is to nationalize a lot of these industries.
Yeah, we like to say socialize because we want a bottom-up democratic control, not just some bureaucracy in Washington that's not responsive. But I think one thing people need to remember is that when Enron was manipulating energy in California, PG&E and the other IOUs, investor-owned utilities, we call them IOUs, they got bamboozled, and there were brownouts then. Where you didn't get the brownouts was where you had public power, the Los Angeles system and the Sacramento system. We already got 2,000 examples of socialized energy. It's 2,000 public power systems and cooperative systems in this country. And on average, they provide energy at 15% less. They provide better maintenance of their infrastructure. And when there are outages because of natural disasters, I mean, example here in New York, we had an ice storm, and the cooperatives and the public power systems were up within a day or two. It used to be called Niagara Mohawk. Now it's National Grid, or we call it National Greed. It took them 6 weeks to get the power back on in the middle of winter in these freezing communities. So, the idea that the public sector is less efficient is a falsity. Particularly in the energy field, which is a natural monopoly in terms of distributing electric power.
And one thing I just want to jump in with super quick, because I keep seeing it in the chat, and y'all were talking about PG&E that I did not know about until, my assistant Ashley and I had a real good conversation. She's a native Californian and dealing with those wildfires. The fact that, someone brought up when we're talking about labor and the roles of the labor union, also don't forget about people who are incarcerated, who are being used for, firefighting and also, who are also working for some really big name businesses and not receiving a living wage, not receiving benefits, not receiving a guarantee of work when they are released. And so I think that, that is an excellent point. I think that is one that a lot of times when we're talking about the labor movement, we tend to overlook the fact that the folks who are incarcerated because of that loophole in the 13th Amendment that says that, slavery is at least nominally outlawed in the United States, unless you're incarcerated, that capitalists have been exploiting that since forever. And so I think that, it's important to us as folks who are talking about jobs with justice, and that, we have to include all workers, go back to our socialist roots. This time, I think one thing we absolutely have to include people who are incarcerated, and lifting up and fighting for the rights of incarcerated workers as well as we do everybody else. So I think that was an excellent point.
So maybe there's some questions that are coming in. Okay, our moderator behind the scenes says 1 second for that question.
So many of them are good. Like, if y'all been like watching the chat, there are a lot of good points being raised. I'm just like, dude. So yeah, it'll just give her a second. Y'all been throwing them left and right, and they're good.
All right, the question is, can we talk about police unions? And I'll start with that. Every working person ought to have the right to unionize, but that doesn't mean if they don't provide solidarity to other working people, we have to reciprocate. So there's been moves to expel some of these police unions that are, they have a history of strike breaking on behalf of bosses. And now they're getting whipped up by Trump and the white racist vigilante groups who have been recruiting their members to police forces. I mean, we got a clean house. And that's why Angela and I are saying it's not enough like this justice was a congressional bill, justice and policing or whatever it's called. Yeah. It's about reforming use of force policies mainly. But as long as the police police themselves, they're going to get away with the crimes they're committing, the assaults, the murders, and these rackets like civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah.
So community control, we're not just talking about citizen review boards or civilian review boards that the politicians appoint. We're talking about the community electing a commission or even selecting them by lot like juries that have the power to hire and fire the police chief, to set the policies and independently investigate and discipline officers so that they work for us and not the power structure. The police police themselves, but they're set up by the politicians to do what they do, which is to police the boundaries of the new Jim Crow, which are the school district lines, the municipal lines that keep us segregated and divided. And that's because the real estate industry is the money behind the democratic machines that have set these police departments up to do what they do. So we got to get much more radical if we're going to deal with this problem of police brutality and police murders, and realize that they are linked up with the white vigilante forces out there, which Trump is called to come out from under their rocks. And, we've seen what's happened, and it could get worse. Trump's saying the election might be rigged, and if he loses, he might be calling on those people to act out. And with them, while I think the military proper is probably not going to follow his orders to do that kind of thing, you got agencies like Border Patrol, which is racist to the core. We know about that Facebook page they had that, a year ago, full of racist and misogynistic invective that half the Border Patrol, 10,000 out of 20,000 people, were on. And they volunteered to go to Portland. And they let themselves be used as props at that crime scene on the west lawn of the White House where Trump gave his acceptance speech. That is total violation of the Hatch Act. And they were there in uniform. We got to watch out for all those people, which gets back to we got to bring law enforcement under community control. Otherwise, they're going to abuse us, including the labor movement. And strike breaking, you know, if we set up a picket to block scabs, more likely than not, the police are going to charge us and, you know, give us a problem rather than the scabs. So anyway, that's my thought on police unions. I have a cousin who's a prison guard. He's got a good pension. He's a pretty progressive guy, particularly on drug policy reform. He's in Hawaii. He saw what happened with mass incarceration. You know, I'm glad he had a union contract and he's retired with a decent pension. But and he's told me about some of the people he was working with shouldn't have been in that job because they were sociopaths. They weren't people there to help the prisoners. So I think every worker has the right to organize, but that doesn't mean we have to accept the police unions we got.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, Howie. I think we have to be very critical of like the police unions and everything they stand for. I mean, they're supposed to be a union. They're supposed to be in solidarity with the workers. And you're right. I mean, every time workers, go on strike, are on the picket lines, instead of the police unions taking a solidarity stance, they don't have a problem with their own members going and breaking the strike and beating up the workers or arresting the workers, arresting our own members, and doing the dirty work for the boss. And we should change what we mean about reforming, like, the police stations and, the police and systems in general is like, we have to change the dynamics, the culture, because the unions are not doing it themselves. The police unions are not changing that culture of racism within their ranks. They're not, so-called good cops, which I still don't believe there's any good cops, honestly. That's my opinion. I mean, the system itself trains these people. They dehumanize them. Like, I mean, they basically take away their humanity in a way. They like similar to the military. You have to train when you recruit somebody. You have to train them to like not care about people, and so they take away your humanity first of all, because like and then they train you on like how to like be repressive, how to be a repressive force. Because I mean, in our shops, I mean, if if you've messed up and it's clearly your fault, I mean, there's hardly like, I mean, for example, like these police officers that are killing people and deliberately are killing them because they're racist, because these police officers are racist and everything, and yet they don't get fired or anything like that. And then on top of that, it costs the city millions of dollars. I mean, if you're a worker and you cost the boss millions of dollars, your ass is gonna be gone. You know what I mean? And you could kiss your career goodbye. The same thing has to be right here. Like if you're out there shooting people, beating up people, and just because you feel like doing that because you're a racist cop, and you get caught and then you should be held accountable. Your pension should be gone. You shouldn't be able. You should be take your badge and your career is gone. That means you're not gonna be able to go and apply in every other place that you could think, like another police station. And then a lot of the reasons why they get away with a lot of this stuff is because it's in their union contracts as well. Because basically, if for example, the reason why they go on a paid vacation or paid leave when they shoot somebody is because it's in their union contract. I mean, anywhere else you don't find this. Not even in actual union contracts. You won't find anything like that in our union contracts. Let alone like being able to get away. If you actually are responsible for any issues that happen at work. So I mean, I completely agree with you. There needs to be like a lot of reforms happening, especially with the unions, police unions. I mean, all of them, all the police unions endorse Trump. I mean, they it has to start right there, because I mean they're not doing it, and then all the like going back to the so-called good cops, whenever they want to report something bad, they get fired. There's no real protection for whistleblowers in none of those departments. None of those departments. That's why, like, people that maybe do become police because they want to, like, make a difference or whatever, they don't have no recourse, or like they don't have no ability to stay safe, be protected, and be a whistleblower. You know what I mean? There's no whistleblower protection laws there. There's no nothing, you know? So it's like, it has to start somewhere, and it has to start with the unions, you know, and it has to start with giving more control to the community over the police, you know?
Tom Kopp asks, how about a shorter work week?
We are here for that. I know I'm still in your president, but we're here for that. We are. We're here for that. One of the things that we said is making sure that people are, maintaining the same, that yes, you don't have to have the work week structure that we currently have in order for people to still make the money that they need to make. So making sure that, folks are still making a living wage, but, demanding less time away from, spent in your workplace. I know my workplace, my average during the summer, my average day is between 12 and a half and 13 hours. That is my average. Yeah, I drive a dump truck. And y'all know, we run in spring and summer. So you got to get it. And just thinking about, and I've seen this before, like people can still accomplish what they need to accomplish, while we have to serve capitalism. But, also allowing space for people to be able to take care of the things that they need to take care of. And so you keep the wages, make sure that people are still having a living wage, but also, you don't have to work 70 hours to make it. And Howie, because you're a lot more eloquent on that subject than I am, so yeah.
Well, it's long been in demand going back to the 30s, like 30 hours work for 40 hours pay. And what we need is a way of taking the surplus that we produce that now goes to the owners and appropriating that socially and then distributing it to workers so that you would get 30 hours at your regular wage, but then you'd get a second paycheck from the government. It'd be like social distribution of the economic surplus that we're creating, but the capitalists are taking. And a man named Andre Gortz did a lot of writing about that in the 80s and 90s that's worth examining. But we can preempt that. Instead of redistribution, we can do pre-distribution and get a fair distribution right at the start. I saw the question in the chat, do we support the right to own, the right of first refusal? And I think that what that refers to is worker cooperatives. So when a company is being sold, should workers have the first right to buy that and run it as a cooperative? Yes, they should. And I would go a step further. We should have a process whereby the workers can, like you organize to set up a union by getting majority support, a process to turn a business into a cooperative. Maybe when the businesses get above a certain size and below a size where they ought to be socialized because they're so big and systemic, the workers ought to have a right to set up a process to turn them into cooperatives. I think that all needs to be developed. And then in a cooperative, at the end of the year, the net income or the profit is distributed back to the workers in proportion to the labor they contributed, instead of to the owners who just own a piece of paper saying I'm a stock owner and they get a dividend. Or they're a top executive and they work it so their salary is way beyond the actual value they contribute to the business. I mean, in these companies, when I was in UPS, we're making, and they like a lot of us to work part-time, so we're making, $20,000 a year, and the CEO is making $20 million a year. Mm-hmm. He may be good, but he's not that good, because that is, that's like let's see, 200,000 would be one order, 2 million, 20 million. That's 3 orders of magnitude better. That's what, 1,000, a million. It's a million times better, or no, it's 1,000 times better. You know, he's not producing 1,000 times more value than those of us sweating our butts off and getting dirty, getting those packages moved. So that is such an injustice. It's so obvious that that's something the labor movement should be explaining. In fact, I'm going to get you a UE cartoon here.
I think one of the problems that we also have in this country is we tend to deify people who make a lot of money without questioning how they got that money, or who's actually making that money for them. Like, there's this idea that if you have a lot of money, you deserve it. Jeff Bezos deserves nothing. I mean, you have them, and I think our people have to understand, these people have the money that they have because we create it for them. We generate it for them. And we tend to think that, as workers, this is just the way it is. And this person amassed all this money and I'm still struggling, even though I am the one that is producing this wealth. I'm struggling, and that's just the way it is. No, baby, that's not the way it is. We are actually, the workers have the power. And I think, that's always the theme for both May Day and Labor Day. The workers got the power, and we need to act like we got it.
So I don't know if you can read that. This is a classic cartoon.
Oh, yeah, Fred Wright.
The cartoon is Fred Wright. The Union Bug is IWW from the New England Free Press, which is now defunct, but was a big part of the movement back in the 1960s and 70s. So I'm just going to read this cartoon. It illustrates the point, first of all, of union educating their members, and also what we're talking about. So in the first frame, the reporter asks the boss, "What did you tell that man just now?" And the boss says, "I told him to work faster." And the reporter asks, "How much do you pay him?" And the boss says, $15 a day. This is about 1970 or so. Reporter, "Where do you get the money to pay him?" The boss says, "I sell products." Reporter, "Who makes the products?" Boss, "He does." "How many products does he make in one day?" $50 worth. Then instead of you paying him, he pays you $30 a day to tell him to work faster, the reporter says. Boss goes, "Huh?" Boss says, "Well, I own the machines." Reporter, "How did you get the machines?" "I sold products and bought them," says the boss. "And who made those products?" the reporter says. And the boss says, "Shut up. He might hear you."
Yeah, that's a classic. Yeah. No, I actually have some of those posters. Yeah, in UE, we're one of the few unions that actually had a cartoonist, and that's a great way to educate, working folks. We've always liked a good comic strip, especially one that's questioning like class politics. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Honest Educator L. Social Security, Howie, please.
Caps, they meant for you to see that.
Yeah, well, immediately we want to lift the cap on who pays Social Security. Right now, a little over $130,000. Any more money you make above that, you don't pay your Social Security tax. If you have those high earners pay the tax like the rest of us do on our income, Social Security will be a lot more solvent. And there are other reforms that should be made so that our position is we need to double Social Security benefits. So every senior has a public defined benefit pension called Social Security that puts them above the poverty line. So everybody can securely retire. We got too many seniors who are working themselves literally to death because they ought to be retired. They've made their contribution, but they're not in a position, particularly baby boomers. We talked about stagnant wages. They're basically the same in real terms as they were in 1973. But the cost of housing and healthcare and college for the kids has gone through the roof. So, people raised their families, supported their families, worked, and they paid those high medical bills and that high housing cost, and maybe tried to send their kids to college, and they're probably in debt for that. And now they can't live off of Social Security. They got to keep working, and now their kids are in debt. In fact, they're members of people receiving Social Security. Their checks are getting garnished to pay off student loan debts. I've mentioned this before. Coley Clark was a civil rights activist. She was Medgar Evers' assistant when he was assassinated in Mississippi. Got involved in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Went up north with Dr. King when he tried to take the movement north to Chicago. And eventually in New York, got into the state university system, got a degree, actually taught for a while. But her checks were being garnished to pay off debts from back in the 1980s. And, that's just not right.
Yeah, I mean, in LA, I mean, we have a crisis in housing, and due to gentrification, and it's happening in all the urban areas. I mean, one of the major groups that's impacted a lot is seniors. Given the fact that we should protect the Social Security as much as possible, increase it. We need to increase it to keep up with the cost of living. Basically, if you're in LA, one of the most fearful things that a senior has is because they might be in a non-rent control building, and if they're in a non-rent control building, like they're so fearful of any little raise on their rent, could probably bring them out, make them homeless, because they live in a fixed income, and for long periods of time in our working class communities. Before this whole wave of gentrification and displacement and everything, the rent control buildings, since we had a lot more of them, actually determined the rate of other buildings that weren't rent control. So like a lot of the mom and pop shop, landlords would maintain the rents like almost at rent control levels. But now the last 15 years or so, there's been a reversal on that, where now non-rent control buildings are being sold, and the first thing new landlords, which is a lot of them are corporate landlords, what the first thing they want to do is raise it up so much that they don't care who's living there, and in some cases it's like seniors with fixed income that unfortunately didn't end up in a rent control building. And so, it goes back to the Social Security being so low. It goes back to the fact that we don't really have a public housing program for not just working people, but also for our seniors to be able to. I mean, you should see some of the stories right here in LA. I mean, you come across seniors that are non-rent control building. Their worst nightmare is like, if I get a rent increase by next year, I might be homeless. So yeah, it's definitely we definitely need to fight for Social Security and make it even better. And I know you guys have a really good plan.
Yeah, our Green New Deal housing plan, public housing, is 25 million units over 10 years. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out with one for 250,000 units over 10 years. And when I saw that, I said, well, why did they pick that number? It has no relationship to the need. I mean, we're talking about a housing program that decreases segregation instead of increases it, like public housing did from the end of World War II until about 1970, when they stopped building public housing pretty much. And, there are almost 10 million people who are low income that don't have access to affordable units. So if you're going to have mixed income developments, so professionals and middle income working people and low income people all live in the same development, so we desegregate, we set aside 40% for those low income people. So that's how we got to 25 million. Also, when they passed the Fair Housing Act, Congress passed a bill to create 45 or 25 million units of affordable housing over the next decade. The problem was, this is the early days of neoliberalism. Instead of doing it directly as public housing through the public sector, which is more cost effective, they said we're going to do quote unquote public-private partnerships. When you hear that phrase, what they're saying is corporate welfare.
Yeah.
Public subsidies for private developers who grudgingly create affordable units under terms like you get a tax credits and things that run out. And when they run out, then they turn them back into high end, or they let them run down so much they have to be torn down. So that's been a total failure. And they never got to 25 million because they shut it down. But 25 million is that's my rationale for that. And I get very frustrated when everybody gets all excited about these self-styled socialists in the Democratic Party, and then they compromise. I mean, Bernie's even compromised on Medicare for all. Now he says, well, I'll settle for 55 and up and children, and in between, we'll do the Affordable Care Act with a public option, which keeps the whole complicated overhead in place and doesn't save us money and won't cover everybody. And doesn't cover immigrants who are undocumented, for example. And then, on the energy front, AOC, she handed off development of a Green New Deal plan to a think tank, which never did the work. It got the headlines and then they didn't do the work. And now they don't even talk about it at the Democratic convention. And the Democrats, for the first time in 50 years, are promoting nuclear power, including Miss AOC.
Wow.
So, yeah, people want to settle for that. I think, in most states, the question is, how are you going to vote against Trump? And the strongest anti-Trump vote is a green vote. Because if you give it to Biden, you get lost in the sauce. They don't know you're for Medicare for all or a Green New Deal. And you get taken for granted. You just silenced your voice and gave away your power. So, got a little off the topic, but.
Not really.
No, it's all connected.
Yeah. Heard from La Jefa that we need to be cognizant of folks' time today. So,
well, an hour and a half, I think, is a good amount of time to wrap up. Fernando, do you have any, last thoughts you want to share with people?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. I'm here to represent, the working people. I'm Chicano from East LA. I'm here to represent my community. Here to represent the labor movement as much as possible. And, I think we just need to keep on fighting, go back to our traditions, how we started, these struggles, go back to how the Wobbly started, how they were able to fight. Same thing, going back to our 1930s, 40s, how, the labor movement was so strong, influenced a lot of other movements like the civil rights movement, the women's rights, pretty much other movements. And I think we need to, continue the traditions of social justice unionism. Is so important. We shouldn't allow the labor movement to just, become a service model anymore. We need to rebuild it from the bottom up again, make it social justice unionism, and promote rank and file unionism, where the workers, pretty much are running the union from the bottom up. And at the same time, unite all struggles, not just focus on the workplace, but try to use the issues that are happening in the workplace to connect them with other issues happening outside, like Black Lives Matter, Medicare for all, housing, environmental justice, education, everything, So I think, we're in the right path. I think right now is the perfect opportunity to organize workers. Pretty much the new younger generation workers actually are more open to left-wing ideas. They're more open to unionization. There's been lots of studies coming out, lots of polls where a lot of the young workers are, seeing that, especially if they're essential workers, they're seeing that, they need to have, better benefits. They need to have better wages. They need to have more protections. They need to have better working conditions, so hopefully, due to the current, I know it's really messed up situations we're in, but hopefully we could, use these situations to further agitate the working class and further, keep on building the labor movement.
How about you, Angela? Any last thoughts you want to share?
Like I started, labor is not dead. We are in a place where we can, and Dita's asleep. we can we're at a perfect place historically to rethink. We've got all of the lessons from the past. We've got, all of the lessons that, are coming from the street. Social justice, unionism is absolutely where we need to be going with this. And so labor's not dead. We out here. We gonna be out here. And this time, let's get it right. Right, Dita?
Okay, well, my last thought is, first of all, thank you, Fernando.
Yes.
I look forward to the next opportunity I have to get to East LA. It may be during the campaign. The COVID pandemic has made that kind of barnstorming questionable, but I've been doing some of it. So I may see you soon, but if not, certainly going forward, because, this doesn't end November 3rd. And I think, Biden is likely to win in the middle of this COVID health and economic crisis. If he can't beat Biden, the Democrats can't do anything. And the polls have been pretty consistently, it's his to lose. So we're likely to have a Biden administration, and that's going to disappoint progressives for sure. And so our time is coming. So everybody, keep fighting, hang in there. And I think we have better days ahead for the movement. So with that, thanks everybody for being here today.
Thank you.
Labor
Thank
Day.
you.
And,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Yeah. Bye.